A billionaire offered him $10 million, and this 19-year-old kid from the projects looked him straight in the eyes and said no, walking away from more money than his entire neighborhood had ever seen combined. His name was Darius Coleman, and he grew up in the south side of Chicago, in a place where dreams went to die and hope was considered a luxury that poor people simply couldn't afford. Darius lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with his mother, his grandmother, and his 3 younger siblings, all of them sharing space, sharing food, and sharing the kind of silence that comes when there is nothing left to say about how hard life has become. His father had left when Darius was only 7 years old, disappeared one night without a goodbye, without an explanation, without even a note to tell his son that he mattered enough to deserve a reason for being abandoned. Darius remembers standing at the window for 3 weeks straight, watching every car that passed, believing with all his heart that his father would come back, that there had been some kind of mistake, that a man couldn't just leave his own blood behind like yesterday's trash. But he never came back, and that window became a symbol of everything Darius would have to learn about life, that people leave, that promises break, and that the only person you can truly count on is yourself. By the time Darius turned 12, his mother was working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, leaving before sunrise and coming home long after the moon had taken its place in the sky. Darius became the man of the house before he even understood what that meant, waking his siblings up for school, making sure they ate something even when there wasn't much to eat, walking them through the dangerous streets, while keeping his eyes sharp for trouble. The neighborhood was ruthless, and every corner had a lesson waiting to be learned the hard way. Whether it was the gang members who've tried to recruit him or the drug dealers who've promised easy money to kids with empty pockets. But Darius had something that most people in his situation didn't have. He had a gift, a talent so pure and so powerful that it seemed almost unfair that it would be born in a place like this. Darius could sing, and when he opened his mouth, something happened that nobody could quite explain, something that made people stop whatever they were doing and just listen, like the world itself was holding its breath. He discovered this gift at his grandmother's church, a tiny building with broken pews and a leaking roof, where the choir sang with a passion that made you forget how poor you were, at least for a few hours every Sunday. The choir director, Miss Patterson, heard Darius humming one afternoon and asked him to sing something, anything, just so she could hear what he was working with. Darius was embarrassed at first, looking down at his worn-out shoes and his second-hand clothes, feeling like he had nothing to offer that anyone would want to hear. But Miss Patterson insisted, and when Darius finally opened his mouth and let the music pour out, she started crying right there in the middle of the church, tears streaming down her face like she had just witnessed something holy. She told him that God had given him a voice that could change lives, a voice that could reach into people as souls and touch the places that they thought were closed off forever. From that day forward, Darius started to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the life that seemed determined to swallow him whole. He practiced every single day, singing in the shower, singing while he walked to school, singing quietly to his siblings when they couldn't sleep because the gunshots outside were too loud. Music became his escape, his therapy, and his secret weapon against a world that kept telling him he would never amount to anything more than another statistic. But even the brightest dreams cast shadows, and Darius was about to discover that the road to success is paved with pain that nobody warns you about. When Darius turned 16, his grandmother had a stroke that left her paralyzed on the left side of her body, unable to speak, unable to walk, unable to do any of the things that had made her the strong foundation of their family. The medical bills started piling up like a mountain that grew taller every single day. And Darius watched his mother age 10 years in the span of a few months, her hair turning gray, her eyes losing their light. He wanted to quit school and get a job, do anything to help carry the weight that was crushing his family, but his mother refused, grabbing his face with both hands and making him promise that he would not throw away his future. She told him that his voice was their ticket out, that he had to keep singing, keep believing, keep pushing forward even when everything around them was falling apart. So Darius made a promise to himself that night, standing in the bathroom mirror with tears rolling down his cheeks. He would make it not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever sacrificed anything so he could have a chance. He started entering every singing competition he could find, taking 3 buses across the city to auditions, performing on street corners for tips, uploading videos to the internet with nothing but his phone and a dream. And slowly, something started happening that felt almost impossible. People began to notice. Comments started flooding in. Shares started multiplying. And suddenly this kid from the south side of Chicago was getting attention from places he never even knew existed. One video in particular changed everything. A cover of a classic soul song that Darius recorded in his bedroom with his siblings sleeping just a few feet away. That video got 2 million views in 1 week, and Darius woke up one morning to find his inbox flooded with messages from managers, agents, and people who claimed they could make him a star. Among all those messages was one that stood out, one that came from the office of Vincent Mercer, a music industry titan known for discovering some of the biggest artists in the world. Vincent Mercer wanted to meet Darius Coleman. And just like that, the impossible suddenly felt possible. When Darius walked into Vincent's office in downtown Los Angeles, he felt like he had stepped into another universe surrounded by platinum records, expensive art, and the kind of luxury that seemed almost offensive compared to where he came from. Vincent was charming, confident, and he looked at Darius with the eyes of a man who had found exactly what he was looking for. He told Darius that he had the kind of voice that comes along once in a generation, the kind of raw talent that could sell millions of records and fill stadiums around the world. Then Vincent made his offer, sliding a contract across the table with a number on it that made Darius's heart stop. $10 million. Guaranteed, with more to come once the albums started selling. Darius stared at that number and thought about his grandmother lying in that hospital bed, thought about his mother working herself to death, thought about his siblings who had never had anything new in their entire lives. $10 million could fix everything, could buy his family a house, could pay off every bill, could give them the life they had always deserved but never had. But then Darius started reading the contract more carefully, and that's when he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The contract gave Vincent Mercer complete control over Darius's music, his image, his brand, and most importantly, his message. Meaning that Vincent could decide what Darius sang about, how he dressed, and who he was allowed to be in front of the world. And there was one clause that haunted Darius more than anything else. He would not be allowed to write his own songs without approval from the label. Darius thought about all the pain he had experienced, all the stories he carried inside his heart, all the kids back home who needed to hear that someone like them could make it without selling their soul. He looked at Vincent Mercer, this powerful man who could give him everything he thought he wanted. And Darius realized that some prices are simply too high to pay, no matter how desperate you are. So Darius pushed the contract back across the table, stood up on shaking legs, and said 5 words that changed the entire trajectory of his life. "Thank you, but no thank you." Vincent laughed at first, thinking it was a negotiation tactic, offering more money, more perks, more of everything that most people would kill for. But Darius didn't budge. And when Vincent realized this kid was serious, his charming smile turned into something cold, something that showed the real person behind the polished exterior. Vincent told Darius that he was making the biggest mistake of his life, that nobody in this industry would touch him after this, that he would die unknown in the same poverty where he was born. Darius walked out of that office with nothing but his integrity, and on the flight back to Chicago, he cried harder than he had ever cried before, wondering if he had just destroyed his family's only chance at a better life. But something happened in the months that followed, something that Darius never could have predicted. He started making music on his own terms, writing songs about his real life, about his grandmother's strength, about his mother's sacrifice, about the kids and the projects who needed to know that their lives had value, and people connected with that authenticity in a way that no polished, corporate-controlled music ever could have achieved. His independent releases started charting. His social media following exploded. And before long, Darius was selling out shows without any major label backing him. He built his own company, hired people from his neighborhood, and created opportunities for artists who came from the same kind of struggle that almost swallowed him whole. 3 years after he walked away from Vincent Mercer's offer, Darius performed at Madison Square Garden in front of 20,000 people, with his mother, his grandmother, who had partially recovered, and his siblings watching from the front row. He dedicated a song to every kid who had ever been told they weren't good enough, every dreamer who had been pressured to compromise their values, every person who had to choose between money and meaning. And when he finished that song, the entire arena was on their feet, tears streaming down faces, hands raised in the air like they were all reaching for the same thing, hope. After the show, a reporter asked Darius if he regretted turning down that $10 million deal, if he ever wondered what his life would have been like if he had said yes. Darius smiled, thought about everything he had been through, and gave an answer that would go viral across the entire internet by the next morning. He said that money can buy you a lot of things, but it cannot buy you the peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are, and he would rather be poor and free than rich and owned by someone else. Sometimes the deal of a lifetime is actually a trap designed to steal the very thing that makes you special. And the bravest thing you can ever do is walk away from everything you think you want, so you can become everything you were meant to be. Darius Coleman didn't just refuse an offer that day in Vincent Mercer's office. He chose himself. He chose his community, and he chose a future where his success would be built on truth instead of compromise. And that choice, that terrifying, impossible, beautiful choice, is what turned a boy from the south side of Chicago into a legend whose story will be told for generations to come. Your circumstances do not define your destiny, and sometimes the doors that seem golden are actually cages in disguise. So trust your instincts, protect your gifts, and never let anyone convince you that your integrity has a price tag